Hello, and thank you for joining us today for another Worksoft webinar on which tests should I automate to be ready for e-commerce. I am Mike Beck, Product Marketing Director at Worksoft, and your host for today's webinar. Today's presentation will be recorded, and a link to the on-demand session will be available to all of you who are either unable to attend live or wish to share the information at a later point. We have a large number of participants today, so all lines will remain muted. Any questions that you may have will be answered at the end of the presentation. Remember, use the question feature to submit your questions. You may do that at any time during the presentation. If we don't get to your question during the session, we will provide an email reply shortly after this webinar. Now, let me introduce today's speaker, Badri Natur, head of our digital operations at Worksoft. He's a former CEO and co-founder of Eureka. Badri has over 30 years experience in all areas of enterprise software, from design and development to testing. He has worked with some of the leading global companies in retail, healthcare, manufacturing, education, and high tech. So Badri, as we get started with this webinar, we touched on this topic roughly 2 months ago, where we talked about being ready, getting ready for the e-commerce season that was forthcoming. Now, as the e-commerce season is here, we're right in the fourth quarter. How should companies be thinking about their last prep session, that final digital readiness, so they can how can they expand on their critical test automation strategies and employ the right CX strategy to ensure that both the customer experience and revenues are realized in this very critical seasonal part of the year.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike, and thank you everybody for that's joining this webinar. And as you indicated, Mike, this is a continuation from the webinar we had a couple of months ago, where we talked about performance testing. This is a critical time in the e-commerce business as we approach the holiday season. Some businesses have the seasonality around the holidays, and others, e-commerce sales are reasonably flat throughout the year. But no matter what, making sure that you test your e-commerce applications is extremely important. So let me tell you a little anecdote, a little story. A few years ago, just around this time of the year, as the weather turns, you move from summer to fall, things starts getting a little cooler. So you're looking at your wardrobe, and I was out shopping for a jacket. It was not, I just wanted a nice fall jacket. I was looking for a fleece jacket. Went on Google, searched for it, and I saw a number of options. So I said, hey, let me take a look at one of these. And I just clicked on this. It said, Duluth Trading, men's Showman jacket, $67. I said, let me take a look at it. When I got to this site, this is what I saw. You can see here that the price that was being shown on the site was different from the price that was being shown when I did a search for it. Sometimes, this is not something that I expected. It's lower, great, but if it had been higher, I would have been upset. So these kind of challenges that you see of errors, problems in e-commerce is fairly common when you come to think of it. And we all encounter it. And how do? We vote on these with our wallets and our fingers. We just move on to a different site. And what does that mean to the merchant? It's lost revenue. So making sure these kind of issues don't show up is extremely important, and that's where e-commerce testing comes into play. Today, e-commerce is everywhere. It doesn't matter if you are a large enterprise like Walmart that's selling to customers everywhere. You might be a large manufacturer that's selling B2B, or it could be a local pizza store that's selling through Grubhub, or a restaurant that is allowing you to make reservations through OpenTable. E-commerce is everywhere. And what really matters for these customers is making sure that they are able to transact, their customers are able to transact business through all the channels they have, the online, the web storefront, mobile apps, portals, marketplaces, or even brand sites. So while e-commerce, typically when our customers, so merchants, companies, look at e-commerce, they're looking at the front end, the customer facing applications, but they're also looking at the backend systems, the online, the order management systems, the ERP systems, and so on. For the purpose of this webinar, we're going to focus primarily on testing the customer facing applications, which primarily are responsible for delivering a user experience, delivering the right user experience. And user experience is the critical part here. So if the user experience is impacted in your e-commerce application, that's going to impact your revenue, because customers are not going to be patient. They're just going to move on to something else, to look for the products that they want to shop for at a different site or in a different from a different merchant. So it's very important to make sure that users have a great experience. And what impacts user experience? So anytime in your e-commerce applications, no matter what applications there are, when there is change, change has the ability to bring about errors, problems. So it's up to you to make sure that you manage this change process, understand it, and reduce the risk of any potential problems creeping into that user experience. And change can occur in many different ways. There could be new features that you're adding to your e-commerce site, code changes that are being made. There could be application configuration. Today, most e-commerce systems are delivered through e-commerce platform, whether they are from Salesforce, from Oracle, from Adobe, Shopify, you name it. Any of the many e-commerce platform vendors, a lot of the behavior that users see on the e-commerce site can be just controlled through configurations, not necessarily code changes. So it's important to be able to understand the impact of these changes. It could be upgrades. I talk about cloud commerce solutions like Salesforce, like SAP, like Oracle. And with all of these, they have regular quarterly or more frequent, sometimes monthly upgrade cycles. All of these impact the behavior of the application and the user experience as well. You need to be able to test for these. Integrations into your backend systems, into third-party payment gateways or other product systems, you need to be able to test those. You have customers in different geographies. We have companies that use our products that sell their products in multiple countries, in different regions, in Europe and North America, in Asia Pacific, where there are different languages, different currencies. You need to make sure that the user experience is consistently great in all of those. You need to be able to test for those as well. And browser devices. So today, most people access e-commerce applications through mobile devices. Mobile commerce accounts, at least on the B2C end, accounts for more than 50% of e-commerce. And there are new devices being released. Apple released a new phone last month, and actually it's earlier this month. And you want to make sure that the experience of your users on these new devices continues to be great. You need to be able to test for those. Content and data that change as well. So we'll get to all of these kind of changes and help you understand what you should look for to test these, and more importantly, what should you automate, because that's the whole understanding here, is that while you have to be able to test everything, it's just not possible to test everything manually. Automation is critical to be able to keep up with the pace of change that happens in e-commerce applications. And we'll talk about how what tests you prioritize for automating there as well. So if you look at some of these changes, whether it's code, configuration, platform upgrades, integrations, etc., these are all changes that you can control and deploy to your production systems in a controlled manner. So in other words, these are changes that typically go through a standard SDLC process. If it's a code change, there's code that's been developed in a development environment, then promoted to a QA staging, and then into production. If there are system configurations or integrations that are changing, those changes are deployed into an integration environment and then tested and then deployed. And same thing, if there are new browsers and devices that you want to support, you have the ability to test them in your lower environment and then promote those changes. So we look at these changes in a certain way, in that you can actually manage and control the testing process here. And in most organizations that we've worked with, these tests are performed by either the development teams or the QA teams, which may or may not be part, which may be part of the IT organization or maybe part of the business organization, but they are typically teams that are responsible for testing these, and we'll talk about how we automate these. So when you look at your e-commerce applications, when you look at all the features that it provides, there are a lot of standard features, being able to search for a product, select a product, add to the shopping cart, take it through payment, checkout, shipping, etc. And these are common across, whether you do, some of these are common across B2C, B2B, B2B2C, and so on, but others may be specific just to B2B or other systems. So when you are trying to focus on what do I automate, so when there are a lot of features and capabilities and you have limited resources, you need to be able to prioritize what you focus on. So we recommend that you initially look at your core user journeys, what we call the path to purchase. What is that process that 80–90% of your users are going to take to get to transacting business with you? Identify those and automate those first, because that's your low-hanging fruit. You're going to get, by just automating a few workflows, you're going to cover about 80% of the user experience. And then you focus on variations therein, different payment methods, shipping, and delivery mechanisms, because these are the ones where that may change from geography to geography. You may have different countries, you might have different payment mechanisms you support, different shipping mechanisms that you support. But also what surveys have told us and have shown is most users abandon shopping carts because of problems in either payment or in shipping. So this is where you need to focus your testing on to make sure that you maximize your revenue potential. Any problems in these areas, people are just going to move out. And so it's very important, once you get past your core user journey, to test various combinations of payment, shipping, etc. Then you can get to your additional features, things like wish lists, being able to do reviews, category searches, etc. Things that if you have additional time, you can get to automating these. Then finally, also your B2B and B2C specific features. And again, some of these may fit into your core user journey depending on a B2B workflow or a B2B2C workflow. So the key here is prioritize based on what is going to impact your revenue the most, and automate those first, and then continue on from there. So when you're also organizing these, typically since you're going through an SDLC process, you are going through regular releases. So you have an opportunity to group your testing. So at a minimum, we recommend that you build a set of what you call smoke tests or sanity tests that are run every time there's a change made to your application. Then you have a full set of regression tests that kind of complete the entire functionality that you want to be able to test of your applications. And your smoke test is a subset of those. And then you also identify a set of tests that you want to be able to run on different browsers and devices. So where we're getting to with this is that you don't necessarily run every test everywhere every time. You organize and you prioritize, and that is going to depend on specifically your needs, your specific application, and your user profile. But there are certain common themes and rules that you can adhere to. Similarly, if you're testing module specific or geography specific tests, and these, when you are rolling out changes to your applications, you're going to go into different environments, your development environment, QA environment, and pre-production environments and so on, and you can prioritize the execution of these tests. So your smoke tests are a smaller set of tests that are going to be run on every environment. Every time you do changes, regression tests are going to be run less frequently, but a lot more frequently than you do your cross-browser tests or module-specific tests and so on. So you have the ability to organize and prioritize your tests. So these are primarily for tests that go through the changes that go through the SDLC process. Now let's look at another set type of changes, content and data changes. These are changes that happen at a much higher frequency than your typical code changes. Code changes may be released once every 2 weeks or once every month, depending on the cadence that you follow. Content changes may happen daily. So take a look at this. So this is one of our customers. So when you look at a typical, this is a product detail page on a typical B2C e-commerce site, you will notice that there are different types of content here. There is some content that's product specific. This is product information that may change at a certain pace. So anytime there's a new product that is launched, anytime there is new information about that product or a change on that product, there are changes that are pushed. But then there are certain other changes that are more dynamic, product availability. So there might be, you might get sold out of a certain size or certain color of that product, or that may no longer be available. So that has to get reflected accurately on that site. There's also changes that are dependent on application configuration. So if you see here on the right-hand side, it says if you're interested in, if you're looking at this vest, you may also like these other products. And these, what shows up here depends on a configuration that the merchant sets up in the e-commerce application. And that could be based on historical buying patterns, or maybe the merchant just has additional inventory somewhere and wants to push that inventory over. So they have the ability to do promotions, again, these things based on configurations. And then you have data changes, right? Pricing changes that change fairly frequently depending on the type of business you are in. And they could be promotions that you set, or they could be personalization based on specific users, or personalization based on geography. So they could be, there are some e-commerce sites. You go in, it's you're in Florida, they may say, hey, it's raining in Florida, here's a raincoat. Or you might be in California and say it's bright and sunny, here's here's your polo shirt, or your summer wear, here are eye shades. So depending on where you're coming, it may show you specific information. So that level of personalization, you need to be able to test. And those things are not typically promoted from an SDLC process. So content and data changes typically are pushed directly to production, right? So these could be changes that come in through feeds. So there's a change that made into a merchandising system, new price have been set into a merchandising system, that gets pushed into production directly. And or they could be, if you're in a B2B system, you might set up a new contract for a vendor that sets up specific pricing. That is set up again in your production instance of your application, and that pricing is now effective. So these typically don't go through the SDLC testing process. And a lot of times, if you're an e-commerce business in an enterprise, the business unit is responsible for testing these. And a lot of times these go untested, or they're not looked at as something that can be tested, but they actually can. So you have the ability to test these. If you are looking to test these type of changes that occur at a much faster pace, testing content and data changes means you have to be able to test this very quickly at great speeds, right? Because this data is live when it's pushed, and the errors are out there for customers to see. So you need to be able to identify them before your customers do, and rectify them. So in order to do this, you need the ability to scale your tests massively. That's critical. That's the number one capability, because you have to, when you push out content changes, or let's say you push out price changes. So we have a customer that has about 100,000 plus SKUs, and they make changes to somewhere between 10 to 15,000 SKUs a couple of times a week. And when they push this out and that data is visible in half a dozen different countries, they need to know if there's a problem. And so we run tests massively, 100, 1,000 tests at a time to figure out if there are any problems, specifically identify them and let them know what these issues are so they can actually correct them within an hour or two of those changes being rolled out before the customers can see them. So scale is critical. And you need to be able to run these tests on a much regular basis. Unlike your smoke tests or regression tests, which you may run daily or weekly, these are tests that might have to be run a lot more frequently, sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes continuously, sometimes daily. And one of the things, if you're implementing a solution like this, these changes, content changes or data changes, are actually visible as a part of your regular e-commerce workflows. So you already have tests built to be able to test these workflows as a part of your e-commerce user journeys. So you should be able to reuse those. So you shouldn't have to rebuild automation to be able to test content and data changes. You should be able to leverage the existing automation you have. But the big difference here is you should be able to make these data-driven at scale. So you need to be able to, your data-driven testing capability has to be robust to be able to handle different types of data from different sources, and be able to run these content and data checks at scale in your production environment. So that's going to be critical, especially if you are if you're operating an e-commerce site, e-commerce applications where content and data changes are occurring at a really fast pace and are really dynamic. The next type of testing you will be looking at is performance testing. We talked about this at length a couple of months ago, so I'm not going to go into it too deep. I would really recommend, if this is an area you're interested in, I would really recommend that you go back and take a look at that webinar. We cover a lot of topics out there, but the points that I'd like to bring out here is you need to understand what your usage profile is. So are you a site that puts out flash sales? So if you're putting out a flash sale, peak usage is important, because you're going to have, let's say you're going to release a specific promotion at noon today, you can expect a peak surge in traffic, and your site has to be able to to handle it. Or you might have intermittent usage. You might have people coming in at 9 a.m., another set of users coming in at noon, and so on. So your site may experience different types of traffic. Or you might have steady traffic for 3-4 days at a stretch during the holiday season. You need to be able to handle those kind of traffic. So it's important for you to understand the type of traffic you have and be able to model it. You need your automation tool to be able to support that, and you need to be able to capture the right metrics. We also talk about in performance testing using the right tools for modern e-commerce applications to be able to generate the kind of traffic that rich user interfaces using, say, React.js or that, anything that uses single page applications, e-commerce applications that do that. Your system needs to be able to support that, to be able to deliver that type of traffic and capture metrics for these. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but for the sake of completeness, performance testing is something you absolutely must be focused on. And it's not a one-time task, because there are changes happening continuously on your e-commerce applications. You need to be able to run these performance tests on a regular basis and be able to run it efficiently and effectively on your applications. Finally, the last one I would say touch upon is monitoring. So monitoring for e-commerce application is more than just saying, hey, is my site up, right? Is my site up means, am I seeing my homepage? That doesn't really mean much. What's important is to make sure that your key revenue drivers are operational. Can your users transact business? Can they actually go end to end from looking for a product, selecting a product, placing an order, paying for it and placing an order, right? Take it end to end user journey to where you can actually record revenue, right? And You do that across, you have to look at all your applications, application workflows, user journeys to identify which ones these are. And then you need to be able to make sure these are working all the time. So that's where monitoring comes in. You need to be able to run your monitoring on a continuous basis, sometimes every hour, every half hour. We have customers that run certain workflows every 10 minutes just to make sure everything is up and all interfaces are up and the user is able to transact business. And again, here, reuse is key. You've built a lot of this automation for your functional testing, your cross-browser testing, and so on. You should be able to reuse a lot of that automation to do your monitoring as well. So your automation solution has to be able to support your ability to do that and do this monitoring at scale. And finally, the most important piece, you need to have a very robust notification mechanism built into your monitoring solution. If something is wrong, you need to be able to notify the right people directly, no matter what time it is. It doesn't help if you're monitoring something and then somebody has to go look at the logs or look at a report to figure out if something is wrong. Notification is critical to this process. So finally, if I'm looking at putting all of this together, we talked about a lot of things. We moved fairly quickly about the different types of testing we have to do and different needs. So what does it all mean? Focus on the user journey. You need to be able to automate, from an automation point of view, automate your end-to-end workflows, your critical user journeys that are driving revenue. You need to make sure your automation is reusable and modular, because you're going to reuse your automation for different things, for the functional testing, cross-browser testing, monitoring, and even performance testing. You should be able to, if you have built automation for to test the functionality of your end-to-end user journey, you should be able to use that same test to test your performance as well. You shouldn't have to go build it on a different system, completely build new automation. So reuse is critical, and your automation has to be, you need to be able to build automation quickly, make it easy to maintain. In today's world, there's no reason why you should not be using a no-code automation platform with capabilities like self-healing tests and so on that really allows you to reduce the cost and effect of building automation and really allowing you to build automation quickly and efficiently. Data-driven testing, robust data-driven testing is critical, whether you're doing testing functionality or you're testing data and content, more so for testing data and content and being able to use data from different formats and different sources and effectively tying it in with the workflows that you build for your automation and having them work together. You need to be able to do this at scale, right? Scale's not just running 4 or 5 tests at a time. You should be able to run hundreds of thousands of tests, and you should be able to scale seamlessly. In today's world, everything's moving to cloud. Most of you probably have your e-commerce applications already hosted on the cloud. So there's no reason why you shouldn't run your tests from the cloud. Seamlessly scale your testing and complete this testing in a relatively short period of time. Finally, you should be able to run your tests on all different browsers and devices. You should be able to make sure that your user's experience is captured accurately, no matter what browser or device they want to use. And if there are any issues, you find out about it much before your customers do, so that they don't experience it, and you have the ability to address it. So where it all comes to is, at the end, making sure you deliver a quality user experience, because that's what drives revenue. Change is consistent, is continuous in an e-commerce environment, and that change has potential to introduce errors that impact user experience. And that risk is something you manage by making sure you can test continuously as well. And that's what your automation should be geared towards, testing continuously, testing efficiently and effectively to mitigate the risk from that change and delivering a fabulous user experience. So with that, I'm going to actually open this up to questions and see if anybody has any questions.
Badri, we've we've had a steady cadence of questions coming in.
Okay.
First one, I don't think will surprise you at all. The gist of it is my organization always has tight time frames, resource constraints to automate all my testing. So do you have any recommendations? Where do I start first? Or another way to think about it is, what's going to give me biggest bang for my buck?
Sure, sure. So if you are new to automating your e-commerce applications, right? I've covered some of this and I'm going to summarize this right now. So I would look initially at your core user journeys. So the core path to purchase, as you say, being able to search for a product. I mean, I'm taking the example of a B2C site, similar ones for B2B and B2B2C also apply. So in a B2C site, you want to be able to go look for a product, select it from a list of products that show up, add it to the shopping cart, take it through checkout, set up shipping options and payment, and place an order. That core user journey that 90% or 100% of your customers are going to go through with some variations, you need to be able to test that. So those are tests that have to be included as a part of your smoke test. If you're then from there on, depends on the specific type of your business. If you have customers that use very much reliant on mobile usage. So we have companies that say we have about 70-80% of our user base use mobile devices for testing. You need to make sure that your site works right on your mobile devices. You need to be able to absolutely automate some of your compatibility testing so that you can make sure that mobile user experience is great. If you're relying heavily on promotions, you need to make sure that some of those promotion testing is automated, because those changes are occurring directly in your production systems and you need to be able to catch them right away. So we've had instances, we've had customers that have set up their promotions incorrectly and it has actually cost them money before they actually found that there's a problem.
All right. This question comes up often just overall in the testing space that we operate in, but specifically, what is a realistic test coverage for the digital e-commerce experience?
So that actually, it's not a surprising question. I would say it depends. So no, you don't expect to get 100% coverage, right? So typically any place you do, anytime you look at test coverage is a risk reward proposition. So you need to understand what your risk is and get the appropriate coverage for that. As I just said, if at a minimum you get your core user journeys and then from there expand to to testing various payment methods. So if you look at your 100% of your user base, you can see where 80-90% of how the 80-90% of those users pay. So make sure you test those options. What browsers are they using? What devices are using? Make sure you test those. So you can see that with about a few variations, you can cover a majority of the type of usage on your e-commerce sites, and you can get real value from that. So the coverage is going to depend on how your users are using it. Understand your usage patterns well and make sure you automate to cover that. The same works for your performance testing as well, right? So understand what kind of usage patterns you have and make sure your tests reflect that. So if you do that, then you can accomplish a lot of revenue coverage with the fewest number of tests as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next question, Badri. I know you definitely touch on this topic around monitoring. So the question is around monitoring of an e-commerce site seems to involve dedicated strategies and unique components. How should I think about integrating continuous monitoring into a digital strategy?
Right. So monitoring is absolutely critical in a lot of organizations. Monitoring is, if you look at e-commerce testing itself, it's almost like it's in silos. So there's some testing that's done by the IT department that's building the application. So that's what we talk about, taking tests that go through SDLC process. On the other end of it, monitoring is delegated to e-commerce operations. So my IT operations is actually, they have their own monitoring tools and they run it, but most of these tools typically look at uptime. Is my server up? Is my web server up? Is my app server up? Is my database server up? And so on. But what, from an e-commerce point of view, what you really should be looking at is my user able to transact business end-to-end? So it's not just about a server being up or your homepage being, or your website being up. It's about being able to run through a transaction, because running through the transaction or being able to place an order involves a lot of steps. It may involve third-party integrations, which you have no control over, but you need to be able to monitor to make sure they are actually up and the user is able to transact that business. So leveraging existing automation to be able to run this on a continuous basis, and then integrating that monitoring into a schedule or into your other monitoring tools is absolutely critical, and so that you can actually test that end-to-end transaction on a continuous basis.
So, Badri, as we wrap up, something that you mentioned got me thinking. Generally, retailers are going to be using significant amount of promotions, discounts, everything to seize on that buying impulse, right, and to shrink the buying behavior. Do discounts, pricing, promotion, does all that put undue or additional pressure on the digital e-commerce QA team?
Yes, absolutely. But a lot of times what we've also seen is the e-commerce QA team in a lot of organizations is really not involved in testing those beyond the normal testing SDLC process, because these are changes that are happening, being done by the business, quote unquote, by the business, because their promotions are being driven by the marketing team. Pricing is driven by the merchandising team, which is pushed directly to the production environment. So a lot of times QA teams don't get involved in it, but problems do occur in these areas as well, and the teams should be involved in it, right? So they should look at the overall user experience, because errors in promotions, it's not necessarily because the way the application was coded, maybe it's because the way the promotion was set up. So we had a customer that we were talking to before they became our customer. So they were running a promotion at around Christmas time, and they said if you spend $50, you get $10 off. Somebody messed it up while setting it up in their e-commerce system. It went in as, if you spend $10, you get $50 off. And they actually had about 100 orders placed before they caught it, and they actually had to honor that. So they're actually losing money by doing that. So being able to test things like that as they go live, to be able to test it quickly is absolutely important. It is possible with the right tools. You have the ability to run these tests at scale, on demand, when those tests, when those changes happen, and get the results to the right people, right? You get the results directly to the business units, to the merchandising team, to the marketing team, to say, hey, you set this up, here's an error, go fix it. And they are able to take that corrective action right away. So the right tooling to be able to do this is absolutely critical as well.
So how do you think about it? Does the QA team need to, does the QA team need to surface this topic with the business, or is it the business needs to drive it all the way into QA?
I think it's both, because the business knows that this problem exists. QA typically says, hey, this is not within my realm. I have tested the software and I have promoted it. What happens during operations is your problem. It's not my problem. So this is something that the organization has to look at as a whole. The e-commerce leadership has to look at as a whole to say, I do have tools, I do have capabilities available in my QA automation. I do have a problem here on the business. Let me try to solve them together, bring them together, and I look at And there are solutions. We have solved this problem for a number of customers, and it is possible to identify these issues and fix them with the capabilities that are with the automation that's already developed by the QA team. We just need to be smart in being able to reuse it and put it to the right use. So QA needs to step up, and the business needs to lean a little more on the QA team, and together they can address this problem.
That's great insights. So I think that wraps us up. Badri, thank you very much. Hopefully everyone found these e-commerce testing insights useful as you get ready for the e-commerce seasonal spike, massive spike that's about to occur. We sincerely appreciate your time today, and we look forward to you joining us in future webinars. Thank you. Have a great day.
Take care.